Okay, yeah. So thank you for being here. Katharina, with a great topic. It's already on the screen. So we're going to talk about wetlands, sewer overflows. It's actually a presentation you are going to give at a conference, right? If I understand.
I already did. I had a conference last year, and I did some updates though and adapted it a bit. So it's not exactly the same, but still same
Ah,
topic.
so we get an update on knowledge. That's
Yes.
great. All right. So we just give you the floor.
Yes, thank you very
All
much
right.
for the invitation that I can talk about one of my favorite topics here. So my name is Katharina. I'm working at an engineering school called ENTPE in France currently in the metropolitan area of Lyon, but I'm still member of a guideline group in Germany on these systems that I'm going to present today, and I'm also quite active in international groups on this topic. So why do we need to treat combined sewer overflow? I found this picture when I prepared this presentation that I gave for the Constructed Wetland Association last year in Great Britain. And this is also from England, this picture, and I think it's self-explanatory, not much more to say about why it's actually an absolute need to treat combined sewer overflow before discharge. So in Germany, we are using a treatment wetland that can be designed both or has three uses for stormwater, highway runoff, and combined sewer overflows. So it relies on vertical filtration through a planted substrate. So what you see here is basically cross section through the filter. We have 75 to 1 centimeter to 1 meter of filter material, which is fine sand. And we can then also retain a certain volume of water on top of the filter level, up to 2 meters for combined sewage, 30 to 50 centimeter for stormwater only. And the water that comes in then filters through this filter substrate, is captured by a drainage, and then goes into the next surface water where it can be discharged. So in combined sewer system, the way it works is that we have here on top this small scheme that shows that in Germany we usually have a sedimentation basin in front, which then captures everything that can settle while passing through the sedimentation basin, and the overflow of this basin would then go over the filter and be filtered through it. And for stormwater only, of course, we need only a gross pollutant trap and then go right onto the filter to treat the water. In Germany, we've been working on these systems for a bit more than 30 years now, and it has historically the name retention soil filter because in the early 1990s, late 1980s, as substrate soil was used, which did not work out too well because it has too much organic contaminants, organic substances, and then can lead to clogging quite early. But the name stayed, and it's a direct translation, which you can find in some publications still. But over time, some of us joined the international community on treatment wetlands, and that's why we're going with CSO treatment wetland these days. So in the 1990s, there were some experiments with different filter configurations and a first state guideline in the end of the 90s, then two more to the middle of the 2000s. You know that Germany has 16 states, and each state has different regulations on water treatment, sewage treatment. So of course, several guidelines. And also in this decade, then there were several PhD theses to look at the scientific evaluation of the basic principles. We engineers sometimes like to design things, figure out that they work, and then we try to understand why they work. So that's a bit the same approach here. And I came into this or working onto these systems around 2010. And in that decade that started then, we looked a bit more at evaluating the existing sites. Some of them had then been in operation for a couple of years. And also it made then the it made it's over the border. There was a first development for France actually done, and then for Italy, an adaptation to their situations and national way of doing. And these days we are working on intensified systems here in France. This is a PhD thesis that just was just finished on this by Daniela Portella that I co-supervised. And still, as you can see, also a new national guideline will just come out this year on this topic. So the general mechanisms are bit summarized in this picture that I took from another publication. One of the major treatment ways is surface filtration, but we also have adsorption and precipitation in the filter material itself, microbial degradation, mostly during dry periods when we don't have any inflow, and what is also very important, the whole system works aerobic. So we have, when the system runs dry, always aeration through the drainage layer. And over time, we could also see the retention of the target parameters. For example, total suspended solids is retained with more than 90%, COD more than 60%, and depending on the inflow values, also ammonium 50 to 90%. Indicated bacteria are retained by 1, 2, 3 log steps. So one strong driver of the development of the systems was in North Rhine-Westphalia, and this was where I also started my research on it, where I did my PhD thesis. And there in the 1970s, they invented a wastewater levy that had to be, or still has to be, paid by all direct discharges, for example, wastewater treatment plant. And the revenues have to be used for measures to improve surface water quality and also for research projects up to today. And there are also incentives to reduce pollutant discharge. The advantage of this levy is that it's not a tax that can be used to just manage one of the holes that appear in the general household. So you can't use it for retirement fees or something else. It has to be used to improve the surface water quality. So, and part of these then went into development of the CSO treatment wetlands. So in the middle of the 90s, there were already first field scale CSO treatment wetlands with different filter substrates. For example, with organic top layers versus sand layer. And also the state environmental agency is closely involved in the evaluation of hydraulic and treatment performance. And I'll try to use a laser pointer. Can you see it? Yeah, so this is the state of North Rhine-Westphalia here on the map of Germany, which is not so far from the Netherlands, actually has most of the border to the Netherlands. So now to go back to the next slide. Yes. So the research projects also led to a first state guideline in 2003, and then subsequent subsidies led to building a lot of these systems, and also scientific evaluation, especially between 2011 and 2014. Then a revised guideline came out in 2015, which is also free available in the on the internet, although it's in German. And today, only in the state, there are more than 185 systems for CSO treatment and more than 80 for stormwater treatment. And they can have surface area from 80 square meter. The biggest one is in Aachen currently. It's one of the newest one, also has 14,600 square meters in surface. So they can be from quite small to quite big. We also did a survey on long-term performance on systems that were built after the first guideline. I put here the link to a paper that I did on this. What came out is that these treatment wetlands need approximately 3 years to stabilize the retention of TSS and COD. As you can see here in this graph, so in the first operational years, year 0 to 2, it can still fluctuate a bit, and then over time, and here we are at 10 years of treatment. This is for COD here on top and for TSS here on the bottom. It stabilized quite well. And also we have a bit of a variation with this season, but not too strong. We think that formation of a secondary filter layer and the biofilm within the filter body plays a big role in this stabilization period of 3 years. Then also, this is a bit tricky when I'm using the laser pointer and trying to forward at the same time. Sorry. And there we go. The retention of phosphorus is not renewable and depends totally on the adsorbed load if you don't optimize the system for this. What we also find out with this data collection, because at the time this was made on 25 full-scale systems, and they have not been all operated to textbook, and the samples have not been taken to textbook. But since we got quite good values out of even with this data, is that these systems are extremely resilient in operation. So, as I mentioned, I am a member of a design guideline group, and what we like to do within these groups also is to revise the design over time. And there we rely strongly on feedback from operators. We do investigations on pilot and full-scale systems, and we also then take into consideration observations from designers and their feedback. So for example, after building this first or creating this first guideline, what came out over the years is that a lot of the systems were actually oversized. And you can see here from this top view that in the front filter part, you have quite some dense green reed that grows, but in the back filter part, the water does not really reach the surface so often, and you even have boreholes in there from animals. And then there was also another research group that did investigations of fine particulate deposition. And this is what the new guideline now is mentioned after. They looked at what comes actually onto these systems, because the fine particles might be the ones that could clog the system over time. And they found out that it should be at least 4 kilograms per square meter and year, so that the system is worth building. And currently we set a limit at a maximum of 7 kilograms per square meter and year, according to the data from full-scale facilities that this research group then found out on these systems. So feedback from operating and maintenance is also very important. Maintenance low system doesn't mean that they're actually maintenance free. This is often a misunderstanding when municipalities or water boards, etc., think of installing these systems. So, for example, we have here a system that has been only rarely fed, so a bit over-dimensioned again. We have strong intrusions of nettles, other shrubs and trees, animal boreholes, and almost no reeds left. So the design adaptation according to standards should now lead to more regular feeding, but also if you have a system like that, you need to check for weed plants regularly and remove them immediately, especially trees that grow deep roots, and absolutely not use pesticides to get rid of these plants. It has to be manual labor. It's also very important because we don't want to create a pollutant source for the surface waters. So the guideline group is within the DWA, which is the acronym for German Association for Water, Wastewater and Waste. And I'm a member of the specialist group of treatment wetlands for stormwater. You can see some members here on the photo. And yes, I agree, we could be a bit more diverse. The DWA was founded in 1948 and is politically and financially independent. And the major pillar of this organization is to translate the generally recognized technical rules into guidelines and standards. And the working groups have appointed members. Everyone who is a member can suggest new topics or suggest a revision of existing guidelines. And we're currently approximately 14,000 members. Activity in working groups possible until retirement, and individuals from consultancies are admitted, but not from industry. And then I'd like to point out association internal difference between guidelines and standards. Guidelines can be based on experimental or field scale results, but standards have to be based on field scale experience because they also define legally the state of the art. So if a site is built according to a standard and something occurs that leads to some unpleasant court situations, then as a designer, if you use the standard, you're more or less on the same safe side in Germany. So the standard, we finally worked out a standard that appeared in 2019, which then replaces the guideline that, as I mentioned before, was based on preliminary experience, and up to 2019 we had enough experience on full scale, and which used then the design parameter TS, the fine particles, the TSS 63, which replaces COD load as key design parameter, which led to this oversizing I mentioned before. The values can be estimated from connected surfaces, and I already mentioned the yearly range. And currently, the Constructed Wetland Association in Great Britain is helping me finalize the English translation of this guideline, so that hopefully this year this might appear. It's already available in German, but yeah, not in English yet. Another change that we did is that the filter overflow should be placed at the end of the basin so that all incoming water passes over the filter, and it allows removal also further removal of settleable particles from the filter overflow. And at least 2 filter beds with alternating inflow should be privileged. So I fear the comparison of 2 systems, one built after the first guideline and then the next one to the current standard. So you can see here, one thing that we changed is that feeding has to be from the long side instead of the short side. So I showed this picture of the feeding from the short side where the water would flow this way. And now this is a system that got into operation last year, and you have this feeding side here which allows the water to come in and then get fed all over the filter system from the short side. So the new guideline then, which will come out this year, we just finalized it, and then it has to undergo an internal process. It has 5 chapters with recommendations for increased and long-term phosphorus removal, targeted micropollutant removal, removal of microorganisms, then increased particulate organic load, and decentralized miniature treatment wetlands. I will explain in a second what that means. So for phosphorus removal, if you want the general system, as I said, it depends totally on how much you put on and how long you use the system. Here you can either use precipitation with iron salt in the primary stage, so it will stay in the sedimentation basin and can then be cleared by the operational stuff from a wastewater treatment plant, or automatically, depending on how you run the system. Then also you can meliorate the filter materials, so put in specific materials such as steel slag or iron hydroxide, or use a post-sorption step. If you want to increase the retention of micropollutants, there are several options you can do. For example, reducing throttle outflow or meliorating with granulated activated carbon. Here's, for example, proposition for how you could meliorate this filter material. You can use co-treatment of a sewage with a sewage treatment plant effluent. I will explain in the next slide how that works, or use again a post-treatment step of organic and anorganic adsorbers. So there's one example of co-treatment of sewage treatment plant effluent, which is existing in full scale at a wastewater treatment plant of Rheinbach. You have here the filter just after starting operation with 3 different filter beds, and it is serving as treatment for micropollutants of the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant during dry period. So the water comes through this concrete structures here on top of the filter level, and so if we have dry situation, these 3 filter beds get intermittently charged, and then we have the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant filtered through and to the surface waters when being treated for micropollutants. If we now have a CSO event, then the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant goes directly into the surface water, and the CSO overflow then passes completely over all of these 3 filter beds, so that the CSO gets treated in this case, and after 48 hours of recovery period after emptying the system, we can then start again feeding with the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant. And the idea behind this is that this continuous feeding of the system with the effluent of the wastewater treatment plant allows a more constant microbial community to install that then removes the micropollutants and the other particles in a better way. And I also put reference here because there was research projects from other groups also on this system. So if you then want to increase the removal of microorganisms, you can do this by reducing the throttle outflow and have a filter layer of 1 meter. So you increase the contact time again of the filtered water with the filter material and the microfilm, or that's in there, and or treat it with UV irradiation in the effluent. So there was also an evaluation on systems that have already been very early run like that. So you see here, for example, effluent of a filter without UV, so the removal of E. coli in green and coliform bacteria in blue, and then when adding UV treatment, you are at almost total elimination. And if you reduce the outflow velocity, you already have a removal efficiency of close to 1 log step in this middle scenario here that you can see. And then there's a new way of dealing with runoff from agricultural used areas in this guideline as well. If you have, for example, driveways or areas where we store, for example, fodder for animals, and then you have storm event. The water can be discharged into an equalization tank, and depending on the CUD, either go into digester, if you have one, or on the treatment wetland. So far, there's no full-scale experience of this, but it's derived from other applications. No full-scale experience because often costs are a problem in agriculture, but sometimes, yeah, due to surface water requirements, actually farmers have to do something, and this gives them an option to do that. And yeah, peak loads can then be directed to the digester and treated there with, for example, the manure that's already been treated there. And then we wrote into this guideline miniature treatment wetlands. And as you can see here on the picture, this is nothing new. So we didn't reinvent the wheel. It is something that corresponds to bioretention filter in the sense of sustainable urban drainage systems. But currently there is, and this is not only the case in Germany, but also in other countries, that on a national level, we don't have anything written on these systems, only ones that are defined for infiltration, but not for discharge, either into surface waters or into the general drainage. And there's a large insecurity of municipalities and authorities of how to actually allow the creation of these systems. So the inclusion into the guideline allows then a larger implementation, because they can just say, well, it's written here, so it's applicable, so we can then go for it. And the design recommendations that we included there will also allow long-term functioning of these systems. Then there were some international design adaptations. I put also a review paper that we did on these. So here a picture of the German systems. And then the French designs is quite similar, but does not depend on sedimentation basin as the first step, but only gross pollutants, who they go with a full load in there. And the Italian design adapted a bit. The first 5 millimeter of storm rainfall has to be captured in a sedimentation basin, and then the rest goes onto the treatment wetland and in a free water surface flow wetland at the end. Sometimes we also see that a dual property of being an end-of-pipe treatment system and a nature-based solution on the same time can cause regulatory conflicts. This is something that in some areas regulation or laws are not yet ready for. So it's also something that we need to work on or make lobbying on to have that this can be both. We can have end-of-pipe treatment, but this can be a nature-based solution in the same time. And I also mentioned briefly news development. So for example, intensification. A PhD thesis that Daniela just defended at the beginning of February. So this is a design that includes artificial aeration, which then allows either better treatment or reducing the required surface area. And I put in also the first paper that was published out of Daniela's PhD thesis, and a second one that we will shortly submit. I talked about international dissemination, for example, in the frame of a Science for Nature and People partnership project. We developed this freely downloadable book on nature-based solution for wastewater treatment. And very freshly within another project that I was not part of, but that I would like to advertise anyhow, the multi-source project, they developed a tool where you can design or find to your wastewater requirements that you have, or CSO requirements, the right application. And this is now just open for testing. So everyone who would like to can just go to the multi-source webpage and find this. And also we did a series on webinars in link with this book that you can also still find online on the website of the Global Water Partnership, that we did this in collaboration with IWA and the Global Water Partnership. So for this, I would like to thank you. I know it's been a lot of information, but yeah, hope I gave you some insights into interesting work that we've been doing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really nice to see the comparison between the international different, like the Italian, French, and yeah, and also a lot of things are happening very close to the border of the Netherlands. I don't think it really got to the Netherlands, for example. So a lot of these systems,
Not yet. No, I don't
no,
think so
exactly.
yet.
So and some of the systems from Germany got quite popular, like the Mulderigole system. We adapted
Ah, yeah. Okay.
as
Yeah.
a yeah bioswale or Wadi as we call it in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
but it's the most popular climate adaptation facility now. Actually, one of the measures which is nature based. So yeah, it's really a nice overview. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a good that you called it something bioretention swale, or because Muldenregolen-System, I had to teach it and give in Germany. And what I first did with the lecture is put some nice pictures in, because that's part of making this actually as attractive as it is.
Yeah.
Because just teaching the design and criteria and the dimensioning is not extremely attractive if you don't understand the full meaning of these systems. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, and nice to see also the guidelines that change over time, because indeed most people will, implement the inlet at the shorter side, and then you see yeah good examples of yeah reed not growing, and that's quite strange, Sydney, that we don't have that a lot of in the Netherlands. These
Yeah.
combined
Um,
sewer overflows.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, first of all, thank you, Katharina, for this nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. But to go into your question, Floris, yeah, it's also strange for me. Because I also was taught on the university, and there are examples mostly from other countries, mostly from Germany. Yeah, but that's also because my study was with German university. But when I came in the Netherlands and I'm into sewer management now, you hardly ever see them. Um, and one of the reasons is, like you already mentioned, is the maintenance. That I hear a lot about that municipalities or water boards are a bit scared or not sure about how to tackle the maintenance and therefore don't do it. However, that's a bit odd because maintenance from a normal wastewater treatment plant is really complex. So I'm not sure why no one has dared to try it, but it seems to be almost like a cultural thing. Like, yeah, we're not ready for it mentally or something, because the
yeah,
science is there,
yeah,
partly.
and
Well,
especially the guideline. Yeah, sorry,
yeah,
Katharina. Yeah,
one issue that sometimes comes up is space requirement, because it of course requires some surface area,
Yeah,
but good implementations, for example, where you already have some wasteland that has to be recultivated, or yeah, that's not used if it's in the right spot, and you can also put it completely decentralized, so it does not have to be close to a wastewater treatment plant, or yeah
yeah, that's
just
one of the advantages of it. You can put it somewhere
yeah.
else. However, that's often, I think, the problem at finding that space on the right time, because then you have to know the scope of your view of your project. If you want to expand a wastewater treatment plant, or as a municipality want to treat something yourself, often is like you said, the space requirement is a problem. And if you want to do it near a rural area or a city area, then people get scared, like, oh, we're not sure if it works. Let's just do it the traditional way. That's what
well
I.
well actually we have the proof it works.
Yeah, I
So
know. Yeah,
yeah,
but that's why it's strange that we're still
yeah.
living in the old mindset, I think. Yeah, just business as usual. But I
'Cause
hope it will change. Yeah.
you have quite some problems with CSO, as far as I'm aware, in the Netherlands, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We're talking about actually with the water board where I'm working with. Sometimes we suggest like that they should look into, and then it's a broader definition, but just the tertiary.
Yeah,
Well,
tertiary
the third treatment step, um, because they have CSO problems and they don't have money or space to expand. And then, well, this should be an alternative, but I never hear something back from after I gave those suggestions. And actually, we have CSO overflows in our own city. And I also suggested here sometimes, like, could we do something with that? But then also people start pointing at each other, like, who's responsible? Yeah, is it effective or not? And I also heard some remarks about that the costs of um, the square meter of water that you treat are quite high relative to
Well,
traditional treatment.
so what would traditional treatment then be?
Yeah, just a wastewater treatment plant, but maybe I
Well,
know what you're going to say because they also have CSO problems, and then
well,
nothing is treated.
this is
Yeah,
this is. I
yeah.
mean,
So
this
it's
is in addition to the wastewater treatment plant, because if you have a combined sewer system, no matter how big you design it, you will have overflow.
exactly, yeah,
And the way the guideline is set up is that you have to have more than 10 overflows a year. Otherwise, the system is not, it's not getting enough water actually to maintain it over time. And it's not economically interesting. So wherever you have these conditions, if you don't do anything, well, the CSO will just be discharged into the surface water. And
I had a
which,
follow-up question
yeah,
about that because I think it's really interesting to look at how much the feeding is, how much events is needed to keep the system working. Of course, we have problems with that. CSOs are not always predictable. They can be more or
yeah.
less every year. Would you argue that it's needed to artificially create overflows to the system so that you feed them in order to keep the system intact? Is it?
So what is in the new standard is that the one from 2019, at least 10 feeding events per year, and you do this over. Generally, we recommend it's an iterative design process, but then once you found your surface area, that you then do based on 10-year time series simulation to see, do you actually achieve these 10 feeding events at least per year. So in case you'd have really a very, very long dry period, at some point it would make sense somehow to water it. So if you're sure you really still need a system, but you cannot have, or you're not reaching these 10, then you need to have some sort of water source. And there, for example, you could use effluent of wastewater treatment plant or design it right away as a treatment step, as I showed in the full-scale example, to have it as a continuous treatment for
Yeah, exactly. That was the one that actually spoke to me the most, because then you can also argue that you're taking away some of the burden of the normal treatment constantly.
Yeah.
So and then it's not really not an addition. It's not an additional step, but it's it's incorporated in the full system. And I think that would also take a lot more of the arguments away that it's unpredictable, that it's depending of the weather, because that's some of the arguments I also hear a lot with halophyte filters, the same arguments, and then I'm like, yeah, well, can't we just ensure that there is a flow of wastewater? Of course, there is especially if you use urban drainage of urban rainwater runoffs. Yeah, of course, then you don't have a constant flow. But with your wastewater, you do have a constant, pretty much constant flow. Yeah. That would be
and you're
nice.
creating an extra benefit for the surface water because you're removing some extra pollution, especially micropollutants, bacterial load. So
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes we have them after the wastewater treatment plants, the water harmonicas. They have
that would,
a constant flow, but it's already treated water. It's just being even more treated before it goes to the wastewater. And what I was thinking, why didn't we implement? Actually, we had the basisinspanning in the Netherlands, so that means that actually we implemented a lot of large basins underground in cities. Quite spent a lot of money and underground space actually for that to come from 7 millimeters of storage on the combined sewer system, and then we had to have 2 more. So that, of course, dropped a lot of overflows on the surface water systems. But the strange thing is we did it underground, and that's quite costly. And I would say that a lot of these systems could have been in the German method, but still, then it's still out in the open. So there would be probably a discussion about health risk, especially if it's maybe near urbanization. Because with underground basins, you keep it into the sewer system, it will actually get treated. Or is that also the case in Germany? Did they do?
Since we already the inflow can come quite let's say dramatically, so with a high hydraulic pressure, we have a fence around it, so it's you cannot walk on it. It's a bit different with the Italian system, the way it's designed, etc. They even made it in sort of a water park. There's also can be papers found on that, which of course the space requirement is even a bit bigger, but it's called the Gorla Maggiore Water Park. But other than that, there's no health risk because it's within the embankment of the system, and the water disappears within 12 to 24 hours. It's filtered through, so that's it's not like there's stagnant water or anything, and children could play in there or so this is I mean the fence is always a bit of it's a barrier. You can't really use it as a site, but then you also have the protection. And since we can store up to 2 meters as of combined sewage, there's actually no other solution, I think, than to create this protection.
And it's a much more natural way. And also here in the city of Groningen, there are 2 sites that actually gray water is being treated permanently from a lot of houses, and that's also accessible without a fence. It's also about communication and
exactly.
I mean it's in these systems, most problem is the hydraulic pressure when the water arrives. So these CS overflows, they can just be massive. And if you are if you're on the filter itself, when it's dry, you can walk on it. But as soon as water comes in, it's like quicksand. So you would just drown in there. So that's the danger of. But that's.
But I think that's a design problem for urban planners also a bit, because you can actually tackle that quite easy with having it costs money, of course, but having an heighted walkway.
Sure.
And then just put it far away from where the water comes in, so you don't have these hydraulic pressure problems. And communication, of course. But if you make it like a water park, all about the whole thing, then it could be different. But actually, I think that's also one of the problems why here it's not really popular, because for I'm sad to say, even people here have these questions with bioswales that they are saying is it's again like should we should we make it accessible because it's dirty water? And then I'm like, oh, here we go again. We
and that's
actually, yeah, it's a really
when
strange discussion because in the end it doesn't really, the risks are really low. They're not higher, and a few meters away there is like how do you say sloot eigenlijk?
yeah,
Yeah.
you
A
have on
ditch.
channels, ditches. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, exactly, and everybody can jump in that if they want. So
we
this
met at
this
the
often
conference. Sorry,
yeah,
we met at the conference in Delft last year, and then
Yeah.
there's all this discussion around security, and then you can
yeah,
just fall into the next channel.
yeah.
And
It's
I don't
Yeah.
think the water is much cleaner in there than it would be in a
exactly.
bioswale, where
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
stormwater coming in. So yeah,
Yeah, and so if you put some extra measures, like if you have an unheightened walkway, yeah, of course you could put a railing on it, but then you can still use it as a space, and that's often one of the
yeah.
reasons in the Netherlands that they don't do it because they want to get everything out of this single square meter, and then yeah, and then they also say, yeah, it could smell, and then of course
Oh,
these
there's actually a study on
and
that from Chile. There was exactly the municipality said no, there's no way that's going to smell. So they put in these artificial noses,
awesome,
and there is a paper on that.
cool,
I can send the link through. That
yeah.
actually it does not smell around it.
No,
So
yeah, but I also
it's
had
an
questions on
aerobic
it.
system, and now there is. I'm really happy that these colleagues did that,
Yeah, yeah.
because there's now proof that there is no
You can do
olfactory.
it without smell. We know that it's
Yeah,
possible. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
All
But
right, it's
a
nice.
sent publication. That's nice for to
Yeah,
convince some Dutch peoples as well. Because an
uh,
artificial nose, it means just measurement equipment that
Yeah.
yeah,
actually
yeah,
proves
yeah.
it's
This
not. Yeah. Okay.
olfactoric
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I have
pollution.
still two questions, I think. First one was that you said, well, you should do the maintenance right, but there was a bit of a focus that trees were absolutely not done. And I was wondering why specifically trees? You mentioned them specifically.
Yeah, it's about the roots. So if they get into the system, they will actually create hydraulic shortcuts, and
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
this will make problems. So we use reed on the system, so Phragmites
Hmm.
australis, for several reasons. One is because they survive under the conditions, as you can imagine, is quite harsh, sometimes long dry periods, but then pollutant shock loads, water shock loads. But as soon as the reed is established, it just manages. And also their specific root structure allows to keep the filter material open, but without
Yeah.
creating too much hydraulic shortcuts. But if you have trees in there, you bring in first, the roots can damage the system. Second of all, they will lose leaves that will then go onto
Yeah.
the surface layer and
Right.
create another deposit of organic material, which we try not to have. So the reed itself, also we leave it on the system. It dies the leaves die off in autumn and over winter, but the way that these leaves are structured, they have some sort of web in
Hmm.
the leaves, and it has a lot of specific it's rather acidic substance, which then
Hmm.
also helps creating this secondary surface layer. So we actually
Okay.
profit from this kind of leaves. But if we have for example, a lot of leaves coming from trees that will then rot, they might clog the surface layer, and this is
Yeah.
why we try to avoid that.
Yeah, we have the same issue. Well, not always, but sometimes with the bioswales. So we also recommend removing leaves at least when they're not fast digestible.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what we okay. I also noticed that you said that for okay, I made some notes, but now I'm not sure what I meant myself. Here I have reducing the throttle on the outflow to 0.01 liter per second times square is high enough for what was it?
would be bacterial removal.
Yeah, the
and just,
microbiome removal. Is that like the an optimal retention time, or is it what you found out for these?
This was in experimental trials, trying different outflow velocities. So how you manage your throttle as the outflow. So you have always the throttle at the outflow that then gives you in the end the hydraulic retention time. But we usually have these design figures as these outflow velocities of, in this case, 0.01. Yeah, and this was outcome of trials basically.
Yeah. Okay. So and you noticed that in other cases they were too low, right? The retention times that they didn't design it right for the microbial removal.
Exactly. There was a PhD study, first one of Axel Wouthoff in 2008, who already did a lot of work on this microbial retention. And there were some experience from full-scale studies, and we then later on also did some on, for example, using 2 filters in series, which then again also gives you even better removal, because the removal is mostly done in the first 30 centimeters of the filter layer.
Of course. Yeah.
But yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those were my questions.
Yeah, maybe a last one, because you also showed that the guidelines were targeted at some smaller system, like the bioretention system. And do you also describe, is that like the vegetation, would that be still reeds, or do you have more information? Yeah.
So there the vegetation would not be reeds, because for these roadside systems, they grow too big, and we basically recommend using local planting cultures that you can get. For example, if you have like your molten regolen system, so your bioretention system, what you would use to plant on them, that would also be suitable for these systems. Well, pretty similar, but also, what locally available plants that could benefit such a system.
Okay.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, and indeed no reeds, because that might be too high. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion in Climate Cafe about vegetation, what we should use in bioretention. So this is gonna come back as well. Yeah.
Actually,
currently we will start a new research project 1st of April, BioRestorm, here at the University of Lyon, ENCPE, and University of Tartu in Estonia, Luleå Technical University in Sweden, and University of Montreal is involved, where we will also look at this, and also then on public acceptance on the long term of where plants also play a big role. So I used this last minute for some advertising.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's answered with you should come back when you have results.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
great. So very good. Yeah. Now this was amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. And it would be good indeed, because there will be some questions of people that look this back about the guidelines, and maybe we can share the links also on the website Climate Cafe. There will be.
I'm happy.
Thanks a lot.
To the papers also. Then. Yeah,
absolutely. Then we have a good bundle of knowledge to share with people. And then next week we're gonna talk about Wetlands. Sydney, you want to say some words about that? Yeah.
Yes, we have a former college student of the University of Wageningen, who comes to talk about her thesis on floatlands. And how they work, what are the downsides, benefits. I'm not sure if she actually goes into treatments of it, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're going to ask her anyway.
Yeah, we're going to ask her for sure.
Right. Thanks. Then we close this Climate Cafe. And thanks again, Katharina, for sharing.
Thank you very much, Katharina.
And you're most welcome to come back with new results from the new project, and congratulations on that. All right.
Thanks.
Have a great evening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.